What's up, everybody? It's Pikel with League of Items, and ESPN released their sham of a power ranking once again. So we're going to have to react and keep track of how inconsistent and insane they are. So as per usual, I'm going to include a new point in the sheet. Caps lock. So this is week 3. So for the first 2 weeks, they had Top Esports at number 1. They had some teams going wildly up and down. So like RNG. Actually, I should turn this into a thing. Where is it? There we are. Okay, so then DRX moved up a bunch of spots. Mad Lions moved up a lot last week. Gen G moved up a lot last week. So there was a decent amount of movement going up and down. There were a lot of things that I didn't agree with. But let's just move on and see what happens. Let's see what happens tonight. All right. So this should be like this. And then this should be like this. And hopefully we don't have to move it around too much. Alright, so also because this video is coming out tomorrow, you can expect the So You Think You Can Play in China ranking either tomorrow or the next day, and I'll try to adjust my rankings as well. But we're just going to start off at the bottom of the list. So now we have Dignitas as the worst team in the world. So ESPN changed Dignitas from 45, which was one of the worst teams in the world, to 37, which is definitely not one of the worst teams in the world, all the way down to the worst team in the world. You gotta love that consistency. Glad they're not overreacting to anything. That would be a shame. So let's get all of the leagues into these tabs, because we're going to use this to take a look at match history and things of that nature. So this was week 4. Dignitas lost to 100 Thieves, which it was kind of expected. I picked Dignitas to win that match, but I feel like I just did a bad job in that game not analyzing it correctly. That was the 4th of July. Then Dignitas lost to Cloud9. They should lose to Cloud9. So I'm not sure why they're being punished for that. One other thing that happened with Dignitas was that they started changing up their roster as well. So maybe the instability of the roster is playing into their decision making as well. For a gigantic a gigantic company, let's just call it a company, like ESPN, I'm kind of surprised they don't have blurbs for every single team. It really shouldn't take that much time. But whatever. Okay, so Dignitas went from 37 to 47. Interesting. Next up, Seoul Haewon Prince. Seoul Haewon Prince was 34th. Now they're 46th. So we're having some gigantic reactions to some of the most recent matches. Let's see what happened last week for Seoul Haewon Prince. Seoul Haewon Prince lost 2-0 to KT. That's a pretty bad loss. I could see that impacting people's opinions. And then Seoul Haewon Prince against Dragon X, that's expected. So I think the fact that they lost 2-0 to KT definitely kind of suggests that they're below the middle tier, or at the bottom of the middle tier, but I don't think it really makes them the second worst team in the world. If you took Seoul Haewon Prince and put them in the LCS, would they be the 9th place team? I don't think so. My face might get in the way at some point, but we'll deal with that when it gets when it gets to it. All right, number 45, FC Schalke. Schalke was the second worst team in the world last week. Now they're the third worst team in the world, and I think that's due in large part to the fact they picked up a victory. They beat Fnatic. Schalke is another team that is continuously adjusting their roster. They have looked pretty horrible in general. I think a loss to Schalke means more for Fnatic than it means for Schalke. So I think it is kind of reasonable to leave them at the bottom of the table still. I don't believe in them long term. So I can't really argue with ESPN on that one, even though I think we all know I would love to argue with ESPN on that one. 44. The Rogue Warriors. All right, so we're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into Rogue Warriors because somebody in Discord was asking me about Rogue Warriors and what I thought about them. They're playing in a match tonight. It's Rogue Warriors against... who is it? Why am I blanking on this? We have Rogue Warriors against Vici Gaming. Okay. So, basically, the assertion, I'll just read it. I don't know if assertion is the right word. So, Goading asked, have I seen Rogue Warriors' schedule so far? Gotta be the hardest in the LPL to date, ? Now, obviously, just because a team has a hard schedule doesn't mean that we should think that they are better than their record, but it is something to take into consideration. So, let's see. They lost to EDG, and I expected them to lose. They lost to Invictus Gaming. I expected them to lose. They lost to JDG. I expected them to lose. They lost to OMG. That's an important matchup because you would hope that they could beat someone like OMG to avoid being the worst team in the LPL. So, yeah. Lost to Sunning, which is fine. Lost to World Elite, which is fine. Lost to Top Esports, which is fine. So the only argument you really have for Rogue Warriors is that you think their talent is better than their record shows. And that's probably where I am in terms of my opinion of Rogue Warriors. Like, if we're comparing them to other teams in the LPL, I think Rogue Warriors against Dominus, I probably prefer Rogue Warriors. Rogue Warriors against LNG, I probably prefer Rogue Warriors. Rogue Warriors against E-Star, that's a pretty close one. Billy Gaming, that's a close one. So I think that they are better than LNG and Dominus. I know that LNG has 2 very good victories, so it's reasonable to have them higher. But global power rankings, in my opinion, shouldn't be about results. It should be about anticipated results in the future. Like, anybody can say, oh, well, this team's record is 4-5. They're better than the 3-6 team. That's not like anything that's not difficult at all. Anybody could do that. If you just tasked someone who has never watched a match of League of Legends to put together a power ranking and they did it by results, it'd be pretty simple for them to figure that one out. It would just be really time consuming. So Rogue Warriors, it's not the worst ranking I've ever seen in my life. I think that it's somewhat reasonable, and they're being relatively consistent. So they're low on Rogue Warriors, probably because their record is very bad. But again, looking at their record, you can't really tell me that they should have had many victories against these other teams. Rogue Warriors, yeah, they lost to OMG last week, so they did pick up one game. They lost to ONG 0-2. O and G. EDG 0-2. So that's about it for Rogue Warriors. So when I'm talking about them, I mean, Larry Ball never lost. What's up? Yeah, so from a talent perspective, I like Haro. I think that he played very well at the end of last season. I think Zwuji is fine. Ruby and Wooming in the mid lane, it's not that good. And then their support's not that good. Not a difference maker. Like, not a positive difference maker, where even though they're losing, you could see him see them making great plays. And then for Crazy and Holder, I'm pretty sure Crazy is still a better player, but Holder might fit better with the roster that they have right now. But I get it. They're definitely one of the worst teams in China, but I think that their talent level is better than their record, and it'll be interesting to see how they play tonight against VG Gaming, because VG Gaming is an enigma. All right, next up, Sandbox Gaming. So Sandbox is now 43rd in the world. Yamato Cannon has arrived. They managed to beat Team Dynamics, so now that we see Sandbox is still 43, I would expect Team Dynamics to drop down pretty far in the rankings. Not originally. Previously, they had them from 24th and put them all the way up to the 14th best team in the world. So should the 14th best team in the world be losing to the 43rd best team in the world? And I think the answer is clearly no. Sandbox does have some good players. I've said that in the past. I think Summit and On Fleek are pretty good. Mostly Summit. But it'll be interesting to see how they kind of progress through the season. I know P-Fish is the biggest Yamato Cannon fan in the world. So if they continue to lose, he's going to be very upset. So hopefully we can avoid that. Because I can't have him sending me any more private messages about how upsetting it is to be a Sandbox fan and a Yamato Cannon fanboy. But we'll move on from that. So that was 43rd. 42nd, KT Rolster. So they must have a very, 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 very low opinion of the LCK, because I don't understand how you can justify having 3 teams from the LCK in the bottom 6 teams in the world. Like, that's pretty insane. That's pretty insane to me. If you were just ranking the leagues, I would say it's LPL, LCK, LEC, LCS right now. So I don't understand where they're coming up with this idea that NA and LEC both have a ton of teams that are better than LCK. That seems pretty ridiculous to me. Let's take a look at the recent results. So KT lost to a Freak of Freaks. That's a match that they should lose. And they beat Seolhaewon Prince 2-0. So losing to a Freak of Freaks should not change your opinion of KT Rolster unless you thought that they were better than a Freak of Freaks to begin with, which I don't think many people did. Going into their matchup against a Freak of Freaks, I kept saying that it was a match where KT Rolster could prove they could be at least competitive with the Freak of Freaks, and I didn't watch those games, so let's take a look at the scoreboards. (4 to 11 and 14 to 3). So pretty decisive victories. Not really much to say from that. There's a lot lost by not actually watching the games, so I should watch those games to catch up, but not sure if I'm going to do that. I've been watching a lot of League of Legends. Okay, so KT Rolster 42, and like I said, LCK has 3 of the 6 worst teams in the world. So I'm gonna write that down. LCK has 3 of 6 worst teams in the world? Question mark. Durhammer, hello. Thanks for the follow. All right, up next, Hanwha Life. Wow, not very surprising actually, but still, like, they're just drilling the LCK right now. So let me fix my little infographic. Actually, I'll just do another one. LCK has 4 of 7 worst teams in the world? Question mark. Seems suspicious. They're definitely not just looking at results, because how else would you come up with rankings like this? Spoiler alert, by just looking at results. Okay, so we have Seolhaewon Prince 0 and 6. Interesting that they have them higher than everybody else. Hanwha Life has not won a game yet this split. Actually, wait, no, they have won a game this split, right? In their first match. Yeah, Hanwha Life won one game. 2 games. They've won 2 games. So yeah, it would be interesting to press them on that and see why they like Hanwha Life better than other teams. I think that it's pretty difficult to make the argument for Hanwha Life over Seoul Haewon Prince, especially since Seoul Haewon Prince beat Hanwha Life. I believe that was the Mickey of the Night. Hanwha Life, Sandbox. Sandbox has won a match now, so I wonder when they actually made these rankings. Oh, and they lost to KT. Good catch, P-Fish. Alright, so that's really weird. That's probably wrong. The fact that they have 4 of the 7 worst teams in the 4 major regions being from Korea is mind-blowing to me. But, you know, we can't let the crazy people make us feel bad, right? So let's move on. XL went from 38th to 40th. So this week, XL beat Vitality, and then they beat G2. Yeah, I think the sole purpose of these rankings is to troll me as well. So XL won 2 matches, one against Vitality, one against G2. Those are both relatively good victories. So XL versus Vitality should be a toss-up. The fact that they won, good. The fact that they beat G2, even better. Now, it is G2 without perks, but having that additional victory is going to be very good for their seasonal ranking and chances to get into the playoffs. So maybe that's what they're trying to do, is anticipating the fact that they might make the playoffs. But global power rankings shouldn't be like, how are these teams going to end the split? That's not really what the point of a power ranking is, I think. Like in the NFL, if you have a team that starts off 0-8, but then they string together like 3 amazing wins and look like they could beat absolutely anybody, they're going to skyrocket up power rankings, even if they don't have a chance to make the playoffs, don't have a chance to win the Super Bowl, because it's supposed to give an accurate snapshot of the NFL or whatever league it is at that time, so that you have some kind of relative understanding of which teams are strong and which teams are weak. So I think they're really missing the mark with this. If XL played against any of the bottom 4 teams from Korea, the team from Korea would be the favorite at a sportsbook, unless the sportsbook was only taking bets from Europe and they didn't understand what the LCK was. That's the only way that you could justify that ranking. But at this point, it's going to get pretty bad. It's going to get pretty anti-ESPN very soon, because like just looking at how this is set up, it is probably going to annoy me a lot. Next up, 100 Thieves. So 100 Thieves has looked pretty terrible, and they've started making some weird roster decisions. Whether or not they're justified, we can argue, but lost to Golden Guardians. That was expected. I expected them to lose to Golden Guardians. And then 100 Thieves against Dignitas. That is a win against one of the worst teams in the world, that is a win against the worst team in the world, according to ESPN. So far this split, they've beaten Immortals. Immortals was the worst team in the world when they got that victory. And then they beat Dignitas, who is now the worst team in the world. So you had 100 Thieves beating the worst team and the worst team, and they're above 4 teams from Korea. If 100 Thieves played against Korea, any team in Korea, the money line would be probably minus 200-ish for the Korean team against 100 Thieves. So I cannot agree with this ranking. That's pretty funny. So it went from 38 to 36 to 39. Yeah, so they did beat Dignitas, but again, like I said, who cares? You beat a bad team. They did make some improvements to their roster, so Contract is an upgrade over Meteos, in my opinion. And then we have Poom coming in over Stunt. I don't know if I could consider that an upgrade yet, but at least it's more of a development play by them, which I respect that. Like, don't get me wrong, I think that it's smart to do those kinds of things. But to have 100 Thieves over all of these teams is kind of insane to me. All right, next up, we have Immortals. So Immortals shooting up the power rankings. Why did that happen? Well, they lost to Team Liquid, and then they lost to Evil Geniuses. So obviously, they need to go farther up the power rankings. They beat Golden Guardians for their first win in the split. Then they lost to Cloud9. And this is mostly because they've made a lot of roster changes recently. So 100 Thieves roster is fundamentally different from what it was before. So Alorum has looked better than Soaz. Going into this split, if you rewatch my preseason rankings, I said Immortals was going to be the worst team in North America, and I hated their roster. Soaz, bad player. Potluck, he was a bad player in Academy. Then they put him into Pro Play. He was a bad player again. Ica did not perform at all. He got a lot of criticism on social media, which was kind of unfortunate. He didn't really deserve that. But the general manager and head coach were fired, due in large part to them bringing him in and letting him start. Insanity is definitely improvement over Ica. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. I don't know enough about Insanity to know whether or not he's going to be an upgrade. Apollo and Hakuho versus Altuck and Gate. Apollo and Hakuho, I could have told you that they were the better bot lane than Altek and Gate. From synergy alone. I think that they've been playing together off and on for like several years, and if you wanted a team to perform right now, then they would be better than Altek and Gate. And then Xmithy, good player, very good at the macro game, but again, if you put this team against any of the 4 teams that they're ranked higher than in the LCK, they would get slapped. Smelly Badger 7, thanks for the follow. Yeah, just kind of insane. Like I just don't understand where these analysts and writers think that Sandbox would finish in the LCS. All right. Next up is Golden Guardians. So Golden Guardians, they had a win over 100 Thieves, which shouldn't do anything to people's opinion of them. And then they lost to TSM, which, again, shouldn't do anything to change your opinion of them because TSM is better than them. So they were 31, 32, now they're 37. I mean, I guess you can justify leaving them around here if the other teams performed better than them. So we'll have to look at the results of the upcoming teams. Golden Guardians, this seems about right for them, so I'm not going to freak out about that. 36, we have E-Star. Okay. So E-Star lost to Vici Gaming 2-1 and lost to V5 2-0. Losing to V5 is fine. Losing to Vici Gaming is somewhat questionable. So going into that match, after the first week that I did my power rankings, I had Vici Gaming at 36. So I did think E-Star was going to be better than them for the next couple of weeks. E-Star lost to RNG. E-Star lost to FPX. You can't really blame them for those. So let's think about that again. E-Star lost to Vici Gaming 2-1. That was after Coma started making roster changes and improving the team. So it doesn't feel as bad. Losing to V5, if you told me before the season started that V5 would beat E-Star, I'd be very surprised. But now it's like, okay, they lost to V5. They lost to a top 6. They lost to a top 8 team, definitely. A top 8 in China. So what's the big deal? That's kind of what my sentiment would be. Looking forward, I expect them to have a tough couple of matchups coming up because they're playing against Sunning and Invictus Gaming. So I don't see their ranking going up anytime soon. If they manage to beat Sunning and Invictus Gaming, then we can have that conversation. But that doesn't seem likely to me. So E-Star at 36, it sounds about right. So that's fine. 35, we have Dominus. Wait, 35 is Dominus. 34 is Bilibili Gaming. So now we're getting into a bunch of Chinese teams. It would appear they're just slapping them in around the same spots. So let's see. LPL. Bilibili Gaming and Dominus. So last week, Dominus beat EDG 2-0. That's a very good win. However, Hope was not playing. So, you have to take that with a grain of salt. Dominus against Invictus Gaming, they lost 2-1. So they picked up 1 game against Invictus and 2 games against EDG. Overall, you have to be happy with that. Before that, Dominus lost 2-1 to Sunning. So they picked up a game against Sunning. That's pretty good. And then lost 0-2 to JDG. So, I mean, this seems about right. I think if Dominus played E-Star again, like, tomorrow, that E-Star would be the favorite. So, based off of that alone, maybe I don't fully agree with this ranking, but now we're kind of splitting hairs. My argument with ESPN would be that the Chinese teams, like that clump of Chinese teams, should be better than some of the European teams or North American teams or whatever. But when you're differentiating between these middle of the table or bottom of the table LPL teams, it's tough to put one over the other with any amount of certainty about like how it would play out in the future. And then Dominus against Bilibili Gaming. I think Bilibili Gaming is going to be an interesting team to watch because now that they have their starting jungler back, I do think they will start to perform a lot better. So Bilibili Gaming beat LNG 2-0. They have another match coming up this week. They're not on double match duty. That kind of stinks for them because I know early on in the season I feel like they played a couple of times. So Bilibili Gaming. Bilibili Gaming beat E-Star. Okay. Yeah, so, I mean, between the results and who they've played and all that kind of stuff, 2-4 isn't horrible. Bilibili Gaming lost to FPX, which is expected. Lost to Top Esports, which is expected. They lost to V5 when it was bad to lose to V5 for public perception. And they lost to Vici Gaming as well. So those losses look better than they did at the time. So you would really have to think to yourself, like, if Meteor was around for those matches, what would their record actually be? 3-3, 4-2, tough to say. But certainly better than it is right now, at least from a game perspective. Maybe not a match. Maybe they wouldn't have a different match record, but they'd have a better game score record. Next up, Team Vitality. See ya, P-Fish. Team Vitality is 33 for the 3rd week in a row. So this week, Vitality lost to XL, which is a bad loss, but they were able to beat Origin, which is a good win. So I think that it's reasonable to leave them at the same spot. However, I think it's unreasonable to have them placed above a bunch of these European and Chinese teams. I think that's where the rankings kind of go awry. So I'm not going to harp on that again. Let's just move forward. Vitality. Origin, 32. So Origin is rapidly falling. They lost their coach. And they lost their coach before the season started. And now they went 0-2 this week. Shooting them down into the under 500 record. In their last 3 matches, in their last 4 matches, they're 1-3, and they had some bad losses. Their loss against Origin's loss against Rogue is understandable because Rogue is a relatively good team for Europe. But the way they lost that game was very concerning because they looked like absolute garbage. Yeah. Looked like absolute garbage. Not going to sugarcoat that. I think Origin, from a talent perspective, compared to a lot of the teams in Europe, I think they will eventually be better than this power ranking suggests. I think they will end up somewhere in the 20s. Like, I think they're going to be perceived to be better than they are right now at the end of the season. So the next time they play a lot of these teams, especially the bottom teams, I expect them to win some games. But they're on a break for a week. They have their mid-season break right now because they go through a round robin, take a break, go through a round robin. Okay. Next up, Vici Gaming. So Vici Gaming has skyrocketed up the power rankings, and let's see why that happened. So they lost to V5. They beat LNG. Then they beat E-Star. So they're on a 2-match win streak. They do look better with Zika, I'm not going to lie. And they have a pretty good coach. So I think that's the kind of thing that the ESPN writers are going to be all over. They know that Coma is the head coach of Vici Gaming, so I'm not surprised that they're relatively high on Vici Gaming at all. I think this is about right. I'm glad they're above a lot of the teams that they're above, but I think Vici Gaming and the other cluster of LPL teams deserve to be closer together and like higher up the leaderboard. All right, next up we have OMG. OMG went from 44th to 30th in the power rankings. Let's see what they've done recently. OMG beat LNG 2-0. OMG beat Rogue Warriors, which was a relatively good win, like I said. And I don't see them losing anything. So since the last power ranking, they've won at least one match. Probably just the one match. So that's a pretty big jump for a team that's only won one additional game. Curse, Hacker, and Icon I think are pretty good. SMLZ I think is pretty bad, and I don't know about Cold because he's paired up with SMLZ. So unless SMLZ can kind of turn it around, I don't see things getting much better from OMG as the season goes on. I think they'll fluctuate right around this point in the power rankings and in the public perception. So we'll get rid of that. Then we have LGD. LGD 29. Oh. LGD 29. So they've dropped a lot. I wonder why that happened. So the only match that I'm seeing, LGD beat Invictus Gaming. Very good win. Nothing. Lost to Sunning. 2-0. So getting swept by Sunning, obviously it's not a good result for LGD, but I think it's pretty insane to take a team from 17th and dropping them 12 spots because of a loss against a relatively good team. Like, I have a high opinion of Sunning, maybe that's why I'm looking at it this way, but in theirs they had it from 17th. They had the 17th team against the 25th best team, and that's their justification for dropping them down 12 spots, plus like whatever they thought happened in the other leagues that brought teams above LGD. So I think that's like just basically wrong. I think LGD is definitely better than a lot of the teams that are going to be ranked higher than them. And I mean, we can start right now with LNG. So LNG's at 28. They went up in the power rankings. Let's see what they did. LNG lost to OMG, a team there above. LNG lost to Vici Gaming, a team there above. LNG lost to Billy Gaming, a team there above. LNG lost to Top Esports, a team there above. So they've lost 4 matches in a row, and LNG has gone up three spots in the power ranking, including going above a few teams that have beaten them. So this is a gigantic question mark. That's probably the worst ranking I've seen in this list so far. The LGD one is pretty bad as well, but LNG at 28 makes no sense to me, especially when you take into consideration the teams that they are above. So I know that they say like they take like the aggregate of like a bunch of people scoring it, so maybe that's why this looks insane. Maybe one of them messed up really bad and has them ranked really high because they beat two good teams at one point, but 28 seems like a pretty bad ranking. Sorry. Next up, team dynamics. So team dynamics went from 24th to 14th to 27th. So I think this is really where you see the shortcomings of ESPN and their writers. They are extremely reactionary to the results that are happening. And I know some of you probably agree with that. You think to yourself, oh, well, you know, they had a bad week. I think they're worse now. I'm going to drop them down. But you really need to be more consistent in terms of how you look at teams. Otherwise, it's going to be nearly impossible for you to be consistent when you're picking matches or trying to identify value in betting lines and stuff like that. If you allow for these big swings in your perception to occur without anything in reality that justifies moving them that much, then you're going to be chasing every single team in the league. Like, you won't have an actual opinion on anything. You're just letting the results change everything about how you view these teams and League of Legends as a whole. Fnatic continues to fall. Tragedy has struck Fnatic. This week, Fnatic beat SK, which is an okay victory, but they lost to Schalke, and that is a bad loss. So I do think that this ranking makes sense. If they're doing a blend, if they're trying to have a blend of recent results plus talent, I think that this is more on the results side of the spectrum. I believe in Fnatic's talent a little bit more than this, so I would have them a little bit higher. With that being said, I think there are a lot of teams in China that would beat Fnatic, but their power ranking specifically is catered to a Western audience, and a lot of people want Fnatic to be high in the rankings because they will eventually make it to Worlds, and they will probably do decent in the group stage. So I don't hate this ranking. I think for ESPN it kind of makes sense, but there are a lot of teams that we're probably going to have shortly that they're going to be better than. So let's keep going. 25, SK Gaming. So the team that beat them this week is right above them in the rankings. I think SK Gaming is way too high in the global power rankings. I understand that they're doing okay they're not even doing that good in Europe. What am I saying? They're 4-5, but they have some impressive victories. So Fnatic beat SK. SK is higher than them in the power ratings. That's kind of weird. SK has also lost to Vitality, which is pretty bad. It's kind of reasonable, but they're like about the same. They beat G2, which is good. They beat Origin, right? Yeah, they beat Origin. That's a good victory. They lost to Mad Lions, which is fine. They beat Schalke, which is fine. They beat Misfits, which is good. They lost to XL, which is bad. They beat G2, which is good. And they lost to Vitality, which is okay. So I think that just shows they're in a league with a ton of parity. So you don't have any teams that are you don't have many teams that are head and shoulders above the rest of the league. Terror Tillman. Thanks for the follow. Yeah. So SK Gaming, they're not the 25th. They are not the 25th best team in the world. Not a good ranking. They would get slapped around by a lot of the teams in the LPL. Next up, we have Counter Logic Gaming. So they've been pretty consistent with Counter Logic Gaming, 25, 27, 24. However, I think they have been consistently wrong about Counter Logic Gaming. This week, CLG lost to Cloud9 and they lost to TSM. So right now, CLG is being carried by their record in regards to their power ranking. Early on in the season, they beat Immortals. That's not impressive. They beat Golden Guardians. Golden Guardians is currently ranked the 37th best team. Not impressive. Maybe impressive for CLG, but not impressive altogether. CLG beat Dignitas. Right now, Dignitas is considered the worst team in the world. Definitely not impressive. CLG lost to FlyQuest. Reasonable. Beat 100 Thieves. 100 Thieves is the 39th best team in the world. Not impressive. So they don't really have many good victories. I don't understand why they're rated so highly. It seems like every time they play against an actual good team, they lose. And anytime they play against a mediocre team, they have a chance of winning, but don't always win. Definitely not what you would expect from the 24th best team in the world. Let's see how many teams I think that they could actually beat that they're ranked higher than. CLG against SK would be a good match. CLG against Fnatic, I would pick Fnatic. CLG against Dynamics, I would pick Dynamics. CLG against LNG, that's a close one. Against LGD, I'd definitely pick LGD. Against OMG, that one's close. Vici Gaming, I'd pick Vici Gaming. Yeah, so they are ranked against Origin. I'd pick Origin. They're ranked higher than a lot of teams that I think are just definitely better than them. So I would assume that they're not really thinking about the rankings the same way that I think about rankings, but that just begs the question, how do they actually think about rankings? Because if you're trying to do an aggregate ranking based off of what your writers think about them, and they all have different criteria, then the whole thing is going to look insane. And maybe that's why this looks insane, because it does look insane. 23, Evil Geniuses. Evil Geniuses, I think, is a better team than this. Let's see what they've done recently. They beat Immortals. Not impressive. They lost to FlyQuest. Not a good loss. If you're Evil Geniuses, you expect to beat them, I think. So Evil Geniuses beat 100 Thieves, which they're supposed to do. They beat CLG, which they're supposed to do. They lost to Cloud9, which is fine. They beat Team Liquid. That's a good win. They lost to TSM. That's understandable. They beat Dignitas. They're supposed to win. They lost to FlyQuest. That's questionable. And they beat Immortals. They're supposed to win. So it's an okay ranking. It's not the worst ranking I've ever seen. They definitely have much worse ones. So I'm not going to spend any time criticizing that heavily. But I think when I do my rankings the next time, I would have them higher because I believe in the talent that's on that roster. But don't need to spend any more time on that. TSM. Team TISM. 22nd in the world. Not horrible. I mean, TSM has looked much better since they got off to a slow start to the season. They lost to Team Liquid. Beat Dignitas, you're supposed to. Beat Immortals, you're supposed to. Lost to FlyQuest, which is fine. FlyQuest is a pretty good team. They beat Evil Geniuses, which is a good win. They beat 100 Thieves in a very close match. That would have been a bad loss and is probably a bad win because of how they won. Beat Golden Guardians, which is fine, you're supposed to. And they beat CLG, which is fine, you're supposed to. So, again, this is similar to Evil Geniuses. They're about where they should be. I think that against a lot of teams in the LPL and LCK, they would just outright lose or at least be the underdogs going into that match. So it is a little questionable, the ranking, but it's not their worst effort. Now we are going back to some Chinese teams. So EDG dropped 6 spots in the rankings. I still think that EDG is a pretty good team. I think they have an exciting roster. They're shockingly young, and they have a lot of talent. They have players that have proven themselves but are still young and talented. So that's like the perfect combination of players to have on your team in the LPL. If you put EDG in the LEC, I think they'd probably be a top 4 team or a top 3 team. So yeah, I would compare them to like Mad Lions and Rogue, and I would probably say EDG is better than both of those teams if they played each other tomorrow. And if the sportsbook said otherwise, I would bet on that. I would quickly make that bet. That would be free money in my mind. Next up, RNG. So apparently, they're not the best. They're not the fourth best team in the world. That was their hot take for the first set of rankings, and now they look silly. I think RNG is a good team. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, they have gone pretty far backtracking this one. So let's see. RNG beat E-Star 2-1, lost to V5, was a bad loss at the time. I think RNG is a better team talent-wise than V5, or at least I thought they were. It'll be interesting to see how that goes moving forward. The fact that they have a backup AD carry and a backup mid laner that they're rotating in right now is kind of scary. Definitely don't love that. Next up, they played against World Elite and lost. World Elite's a good team. That's fine. They lost against FPX. That's fine. So I don't think that my opinion would have changed much of them off of this week. You would want them to beat World Elite, but that's pretty close. So yeah, RNG at 20. Meaning there are going to be more teams on here that I just fundamentally disagree with from a talent perspective. Sunning. All right, Sunning, moving on up. They went 29, 25, 19. Like we said earlier, Sunning has had some pretty good victories recently. They beat Dominus and LGD, and tonight they play against E-Star. This victory over LGD is going to be extremely important for playoffs, and I was very happy to see that. Misfits, skyrocketing, shooting up the leaderboard. They went from 26th to 18th. Misfits, I believe in their talent long term. I think that they are a good team. This week they lost to G2, which is reasonable. It's bad since they didn't have perks, but like that was their best opportunity to beat G2. When Perks comes back and there's a 3-game series, I don't see them beating, or a 5-game series, I don't see Misfits beating G2. I think it'll be close. It'll be a good match, but I don't think that they're as good as G2. Misfits against Mad Lions. They beat Mad Lions. I picked that. I was on that one because, like I said, I think Misfits is a good team at their core, and they will be very competitive for the rest of the split in Europe. 17, we have FlyQuest. So FlyQuest went from 18th to 23rd to 17th. They're the kind of team that definitely doesn't belong above Misfits. They don't belong above Sunning. They don't belong above RNG. They don't belong above EDG. They don't belong above Fnatic. They don't belong above LGD. So they should probably be in the mid-20s or something like that, based off of their own power rankings. I think that Solo has amazingly become overrated somehow. Santorin's a good player. Power of Evil is a good player, but this is like the perfect Power of Evil meta. So you don't want to fall in love with him right now and then like forget that he has his weaknesses. If the meta continues to shift away, or if the meta starts to shift away from control mage mid lane. 16, we have a Freak of Freaks. So a Freak of Freaks dropped 4 spaces. Let's see what happened this week. They won both of their matches 2-0, so they did everything that they could to improve their power ranking, if not keep it the same. But they were penalized and dropped a little bit. So they beat Hanwha Life 2-0, beat KT 2-0, and managed to drop 4 spots. So let's see which teams are above them. Team Liquid. If Team Liquid played against a Freak of Freaks would be the favorite, unless the sportsbook was trying to be a predator and steal money from hardworking North Americans. Yeah. That's not a great ranking. So what has Team Liquid done recently? Team Liquid beat FlyQuest, good win. Beat Immortals, nobody cares. Beat Dignitas, nobody cares. Lost to C9, that's not a good thing. Lost to EG, that's not a good thing. So their win over FlyQuest must be a gigantic influencer for the writers. Team World Elite went from 22nd to 20th to 14th. I do like Team World Elite. I think this is probably an accurate ranking for them. They are right around here. This seems to be about right. T1 is 13th. What the hell? Wow. What is happening here? So T1 lost 2-0 to Damwon Gaming and then beat Gen G 2-0 and dropped 10 spots in the power rankings. That's insane. Gen G went from 13th to 6th to 12th. That's pretty insane as well. What happened to Gen G? Gen G beat Sandbox but then lost to T1. So it's similar to what happened last split. Gen G lost to DRX and T1 and beat everybody else. So losing to T1, I don't know how you can justify dropping both of these teams so much, because a lot of their power ranking would be like related to each other and DRX. So that's kind of strange. Those are bad rankings. 11, G2. G2 went from 3rd to 7th to 11th. So maybe they just wanted to get some new teams in their top 10 so they could write about them. I guess that's a reasonable way to do this kind of thing, right? Not. G2, ESPN, kind of clueless. You know, I think that you're right, Smelly Badger. I think that you're right. So G2 beat Misfits. That's a good win. They beat Fnatic. That's a good win. They lost to XL. Pretty bad loss. I still think G2 is right around here. They're like a top 10-ish team. But that means I know where this is going. All right, and as per usual, we're going to read the blurbs for the top 10. Whoa. JDG. For a team so well known for their topside plays, and more specifically the abilities of top laner Zoom and Kanavi, the most consistent performer on JDG this summer has been bot laner Loken. Even with support Lu Mao struggling at the beginning of the split, Loken has looked as good or better than he has at any other point in his career. Until recently, the team looked sluggish and out of sync, particularly Zoom and Kanavi, who need to be performing well if the team wants to return to their spring championship form. So now the question is, are JDG back? A cursory look at last night's 2-0 win against EDG says not yet, but maybe they're getting there. So they went from 5th to 9th to 10th. JDG has won almost every single match that they've played. They're 6-2. They lost to RNG, they lost to Top Esports, and they're writing this ranking as if they are horrible. Interesting. They've looked pretty consistent, I think, for the entire season. There are narratives that they're probably trying to throw on top of these teams so that they can kind of react to their previous narrative later on. So that's kind of weird. I think JDG belongs right around the top 10. They're certainly one of the 10 best teams in the world right now. I think that as the meta moves, their relative strength is going to move. I don't think they're guaranteed to make it to Worlds, but they're probably going to make it to Worlds. Number 9, Damwon Gaming. So Damwon went from 12th to 13th to 9th. Speaking of are they back questions, we have a team from the LCK who is receiving similar discussion in Damwon Gaming. Damwon fell off hard in 2020 spring after an unexpectedly strong run at the 2019 World Championship, finishing with a 99 record and losing to DragonX in the spring playoffs. This summer, Damwon have been on a surprising tear this past week, including a 2-0 victory over T1. While everyone wants to talk about Damwon's solo laners in Nogri and Showmaker, it's Beryl who has stolen the show by putting up strong performances as Bard or his go-to pick of Pantheon support. I'm fine with Damwon being at number 9. However, I don't know if it makes sense to have them at 9 if they dropped T1 to 13th. Because that's part of the reason why you would say Damwon is so good. But Damwon has done well against T1 for the past split or so. So it might just be a stylistic thing. Now we have a very long one. Rogue. Rogue went 2-0 this week, steadily gaining ground in the top 10 of our power rankings. The blue-hooded assassin with the orange fade had victories over Origin and SK Gaming, two teams who find themselves in the massive cauldron of 7 teams that are within 1 win of each other. So yeah, they beat 2 teams that are looking pretty horrible this split, so we are going to give Rogue credit for that. Inspired went deathless on the weekend on Trundle and Set. Ryan Wolf, thanks for the follow. What impressed me the most about Rogue this weekend, however, was this story I heard from sources within the Rogue camp about their work ethic. After the games, the team was instructed on Sunday to take a couple days off starting Monday. The LEC will be going on break this week, and the players were going to receive days of rest. However, players instead watched tape of their matches from the weekend and some VODs from different regions as well. When asked why you were told to take time off, the response was, "You told us the next 2 days. It's still today for 2 hours." I mean, I respect that. I don't think there's anything wrong with players taking their own time to watch footage. I think this probably speaks more to like the organizational ineptitude in a lot of esports organizations, because they think like, oh, this is how you're supposed to do stuff. In traditional sports, we do this and this and this, and we give people breaks and blah blah blah. It's just a lot of like dogmatic thinking. So I respect the players for standing up against that kind of idiocy. You can't force people to take time off. I understand burnout is a thing that people love talking about in esports, but I don't think Faker's taken many days off. Work ethic goes far in creating a winning culture, blah, blah, blah. I don't care about the last paragraph. Let's move on. I think 8 is too high for Rogue compared to the rest of the world, but we'll just leave that alone. V5. So V5 went from 30th to 18th to 7th. So before I read that, let's take a look at their recent matches. They lost 2-1 against FPX. They lost 2-1 against FPX. Beat V5 2-0. That doesn't really mean anything. Beat Vici Gaming 2-0. Doesn't really mean anything. Beat RNG 2-0. That's okay, but RNG is now like the 20th ranked team in the world. So let's see who Vici Gaming has played against. BLG. Nobody cares. DMO. Nobody cares. E-Star. Nobody cares. Lost to FPX. Okay. Somewhat expected. Lost to LGD. Somewhat expected. Beat OMG. Nobody cares. RNG. That's a okay victory. Vici Gaming. Nobody cares. So Victory 5 is overrated. They're officially overrated. We went from AGG. What's up? We went from V5 to being the worst team in the world. The worst team in Professional League of Legends. To the 7th best team in the world in, what, a month? And I think a lot of it has to do with an overreaction. So, like I said earlier, somebody was asking me, like, oh, well, Rogue Warriors has played a very tough schedule. Shouldn't we give them a little bit of a benefit of the doubt? Maybe they're not as bad as their record because they played against a bunch of good teams. Victory 5 is the opposite. They have played 2 good teams. They've played 3 good teams, and they lost to 2 of them. So I think V5 is better than Rogue, but I don't think either of these 2 teams should be above Gen G or T1. 200 years, it has to do with 200 years. Yep, probably. All right, next up, Cloud9. So Cloud9 has been about the same. Cloud9 falls 1 position in the rankings as more LPL teams vault after a highly competitive week in China. Cloud9 defeated Dignitas, doesn't matter, and CLG, who are the gatekeeper for the top half of the LCS standings. Neither of those opponents are particularly impressive. So, like, this is what I'm talking about. I like the beard. Durhammer, thanks, bro. I like it too. People sometimes overvalue having a big dick bot lane. You know, that is true. Maybe that's what it is. So Cloud9 remains a dominant force in the LCS and presumably the world, but given the lack of international events, it's hard to tell where they belong globally. However, they don't seem to mind that when they're putting the rest of their teams above LCK. So go figure. Next up, Mad Lions. How close were the Young Lions to holding first place alone in the LEC going into the break? Things looked exactly according to plan, Get an editor. ESPN, get an editor. Please. Convincingly defeating Schalke on Friday and pulling out the 3D glasses for a post-match pose on camera. Then, Saturday rolled around and proved that every team in the LEC is beatable on any given day. That is not a good argument to make for the 5th best team in the world. On the same day, the 08 Schalke picked up their first win of the split against Fnatic. Mad Lions fell to Misfits in around 27 minutes. 2 of Misfits went deathless, former TSM bot laner Kabe, and nobody cares. This just goes to show you that the 7-lane traffic jam that is the middle of the LEC standings is dangerous for any team, anytime. It was good enough to knock Mad Lions 1 spot in our power rankings, and it was an impressive victory for Misfits, but realistically not a deep concern that this Mad Lions team is imploding from the top down. After a nice week off, most would expect the young Cubs to roar again in the LEC instead of whimpering away. Yeah, Mad has looked good by beating bad teams for the most part. They're not the 5th best team in the world. When we get to Worlds, and let's say Mad Lions makes it to Worlds, I will be betting against Mad Lions almost every single game because Mad Lions is from Europe, and they're not nearly as good as China or Korea. So this week they lost to Misfits, and they beat Schalke. Like, you're not going to get any brownie points from me for beating Schalke. Isn't Arda supposed to be the editor, or does he just seem like the guy in charge? I have no idea. Mad Lions is literally a worse G2. I have to agree with you on that one. Yeah, I don't know who Arda is. I don't know. Invictus Gaming. Are those regions really that much better? Yes. Invictus Gaming. Okay, so let's take that question real quick. The regions as a whole, yes. LPL and LCK are better than Europe as a whole. Individual teams within those regions can compete with one another. So, like, if you want to say G2 or Fnatic can compete with Korea or China, just look at their previous results at Worlds and stuff like that, that's fine. Yes, there are teams from Europe who can compete with China and can compete with Korea. That doesn't mean that Europe is as good as China or Korea. That would be like saying if you watch the Champions League and a random team from Turkey beat a random team from England, then you would say, oh, Turkey's just as good as England. It's like, that's not how this works. It's like that team beat a team from England. It doesn't mean that that team is better than everyone from England. It just shows that at the top of these leagues, it starts to get pretty close. So we have some feedback there. Goading is asking how C9 is lower than Mad. Good question. China has 1 billion people. I think that's true. Better individual players, naturally more people, bigger talent pool. Also, the league is very popular. I think C9 would dog walk Mad. Put him on a leash. Goading is into some kinky stuff. Watch out for that guy. Invictus Gaming. Let's get back in here. I didn't do this. JDG was, what, 10th? Okay. JDG is 10. Invictus Gaming is 4. V5 is 7th. So Invictus Gaming went from 16th to 4th. And, like, I think that it's a pretty insane... let's see. What have they done recently? Okay, so Invictus Gaming beat FPX 2-1 and then lost to JDG 0-2. They also lost to LGD 2-1. So I don't really know what ranking they're like shooting Invictus Gaming up the scoreboard for, or the rankings for, because their victory against FPX happened before the last power rankings. So they're like they're retroactively giving credit to FPX for beating Invictus, or to giving credit to Invictus Gaming for beating FPX, but Invictus Gaming lost to JDG 2-0. I mean, I like Invictus Gaming, don't get me wrong. I think you are kind of splitting hairs at the top of these different regions, like China and Korea. I think it is kind of splitting hairs, but it just seems like pretty inconsistent when you're comparing the leagues to one another. Speaking of LPL teams that may or may not be back, who may or may not have the ability to contend for a title, Invictus Gaming. Invictus Gaming are frustrating and endearing. They've been a team snowballing. They're insanely talented solo laners alongside a strong bot lane to back it up. Their bot lane is not strong. That is incorrect. Puff and Southwind are a liability. Southwind was replaced by two different supports in the same match. The Shy stolen the show with a myriad of deaths in top lane is also Puff and Southwind struggles that have stood out on this team during the summer. Blah, blah, blah. Herculean efforts of Rookie. That sounds about right. Number 3, FPX. So now they're getting closer to where I've been for the past couple of weeks. 3 LPL teams in this top 10 where the question is... There are 3 LPL teams in this top 10 where the question is of whether... What? Is of whether they're back. And the first one up is the reigning World Championship squad. This sentence is amazing. This is the craziest sentence I've ever read in my entire life. Let's do it again. There are 3 LPL teams in this top 10 where the question is of whether they're back. And the first one up is the reigning World Championship squad of Fun Plus Phoenix, who are coming off of a strong week with wins over V5 and RNG. In both 2-1 victories, they seemed to bend but not break, an FPX regular season tradition that has continued from last year into this one, even with the introduction of Khan. One of the more frustrating things about ranking LPL teams against each other is that they often play fast and loose, making myriad mistakes. Do you have an editor? If you don't have an editor, we will appoint one to you. Making myriad mistakes while simultaneously executing coordinated team fights or intelligent objective trades. They give up a lot and they take even more. FPX will always be one of these teams that, due to their specific playstyle and how little it sometimes allows for deviation, sometimes looks worse than they are. That should be ESPN ESPORTS' tagline, specifically with how they write. Because this is brutal. This is some brutal writing. DRX is number 2. I think Mad Lions was number 5, right? Mad's number 5. So DRX, undefeated teams sit atop 3 of the 4 major region standings. In South Korea's LOL Champions Korea. Why would you say it that way? That team is Dragon X, who have stayed ahead of LCK favorites T1 and Gen G, both of whom they beat in Week 1, and are now 6-0. After what was a comparatively easier week with games against Team Dynamics and SP. After what was a comparatively easier week with games against Team Dynamics and Solhewan Price. This makes no sense. Horrible sentence. Didn't spell Prince right. Interesting parentheses. This is getting under my skin now. You wrote 10 out of 47 blurbs. You wrote 10 blurbs for 47 teams, and you couldn't even take the time to get the 10 blurbs done well. Wow. Maybe I should just write paragraphs about all 47 teams and just show them how much better it is than theirs. That'd be pretty funny. Unlike Top Esports in the LPL or Cloud9 in the LCS, Dragon X don't have the same perceived dominion over the standings as their undefeated major region counterparts, and perhaps it's because some of their wins still look really messy. However, you can still be a top-tier team and be messy. Just look at nearly any LPL squad. One of the things I want to highlight about Dragon X this week is that while I may not agree with the narrative that all LCK teams and the region itself are looking more proactive lately, Dragon X are. Yes, B. Connor, this is painful. Top Esports, if I was lazier, I think it's supposed to be if I were lazier, whatever, I would just copy and paste something from my LOL Pro League weekly column about how no team in the LPL is looking like they could beat Top Esports in a best of 5. Another terrible sentence. They should really just read this out to themselves because it sounds insane. Take a regular season series, maybe, since it's difficult to go undefeated in a league with so much talent and so many teams, but not stay consistently good enough to beat the firepower that Top Esports has. an incredible run-on sentence. This is the first thing that people are reading when they click on this article. This is the first thing that you're supposed to read. You're supposed to read, take a regular season series, maybe, since it's difficult to go undefeated in a league with so much talent and so many teams, but not stay consistently good enough to beat the firepower that Top Esports has. That is insane. That is an insane sentence. That is crazy. This past week, Top Esports only faced one opponent, LNG Esports, who are hardly a top-tier team. Some would say they're not a top-tier team at all, but they smashed them convincingly. Yes. Okay. It bears repeating that support Yuyanjia has looked more comfortable with the team, but this week I also wanted to focus on top laner 369, who has recently taken up the mantle of the LPL's best top laner. That is not true. There is at least one better top laner than 369 in the LPL. This shows that apparently Emily Rand likes players to win games, which is good. It doesn't mean that you are the best top laner in the world, though. Well, in the league. But if you're the best top laner in the league, you're one of the best top laners in the world. Whew. 369 aggression, team fight targeting, and willingness to teleport bot lane, creating advantageous skirmishes for Jackie Love, were on full display against LNG this past week. And willingness... See, okay, this is how it should be. 369's aggression, team fight targeting, and willingness to teleport bot lane to create advantageous skirmishes, not creating advantageous skirmishes. That's just an incorrect sentence, I believe. Unlucky. We're on full display against LNG this past week. You know, I didn't think it could get worse than the first few weeks that we did this, but miraculously, this is some of the worst writing that they've given us in the 3 weeks that they've done this. So I don't want to cause anybody else any more harm. So I think we're going to end this video right now. I need to drink something after reading this. Let's get the picks out. I gotta take a dump. That was from Goading. That was not me. Goading, we are not giving out picks on the video. The picks will be posted in the My Picks channel on Discord right now. No. I do have some expected ownership stuff that we're going to go over on tonight's stream. So we have Vici Gaming against Rogue Warriors and Sunning against E-Star. JMO shots, I'm down. Yeah. Okay, well, thanks for watching. This went on pretty long, an hour and 13 minutes, LOL. So I'm going to upload this now. I'm going to continue the stream, though, so thanks for watching, and I will talk to you soon, after I tweet at ESPN Esports. I'll talk to you tomorrow.